Happy Sunday morning. We're going to be working on Penny a little bit today. Variety of things, but we're going to start with the new bumper that has arrived. I took advantage of a Black Friday sale. Remember when I filmed the video for What Else Broke at Trail Hero? One of the things I mentioned was I was not happy with my current bumper. Let me show you why. To me, it sticks out a ton. And it's gotten me into trouble trying to do an appropriate approach angle for some of the bigger ledges that I tend to do.
Remember, you're aiming just inside this guy. Your bumper's not going to let that happen. That's not going to work, Peter.
So I wanted to find something that would suck back a little bit. Maybe get rid of this unused space that we don't have anymore for the now deleted front sway bar. And just help suck things back a little bit. So, Motobilt to the rescue. We're going to be installing a Motobilt stubby front bumper. It's a very, very simple, plain Jane one. We may be doing a few things to make it custom for Penny.
So getting some kind of baselines about where this factory bumper or where this existing bumper is at.
Yeah, it's not factory.
It sticks out. So getting some kind of baselines about where this factory bumper or where this existing bumper is at.
Yeah, it's not factory.
It sticks out from this pinch weld on the grill about 13 inches overall. That should be about the same on both sides, otherwise we're really unhappy. So about 13 inches either side. The recovery eye here is probably about a half an inch or so further out overall. As it sits from the ground, bottom of the bumper is, yeah, we'll call it 27 1/4 off the ground. And again, that should be the same on both sides. And actually, we'll call it 26 3/4 on the passenger side.
You know, whenever I look at this thing sitting on the trailer from the rearview mirror of the truck, it always seems like something is crooked. I'm wondering if the bumper itself is crooked.
It could be. It wouldn't, given how soft the suspension on this is, it wouldn't be the least bit surprising that it sits a little off. Okay, so I think we're going to start by pulling this bumper off. I'm going to grab some tools, some gloves, and start getting ready to pull things out. Off of this bumper, the winch has to be installed on the bumper first. So disconnecting the winch from the electrical system is the beginning. Then we pull the bolts off, take the bumper off, then we can dismount the winch from the bumper.
I'm trying to decide if I'm going to get a new winch line this year. This winch line is 3 years old, and yes, it has been used. At one event, it was used almost every single day. So I'm thinking it might be time, just for safety's sake, to replace the line. I haven't ordered it yet, so we're not going to worry about that at this moment.
The way we've routed the winch lines, or the winch cables on this thing, they come under the grill up and then ride this bar back to the battery. Zip ties are a wonderful thing until you have to do service, because the only option for a zip tie is to break it, which means we have to,
Single-use device.
yep, disconnect them just like that. Those are disconnected. Heavy gauge winch cables.
And an airplane.
This particular bumper is held on by a total of 6 bolts, 4 on top and 2 below the frame. On this vehicle, we need to keep the bolts in the correct position, because some of these have been drilled out and replaced with different thread size bolts. Everything on this 04 TJ was metric from the factory. Some of this stuff has been retapped with SAE bolts. So keeping straight what goes where is important. Less so, I'm sure, on a Jeep that hasn't been molested. We also have this aftermarket skid plate over the steering box that will have to come off at least for the duration of the bumper swap.
Well, it's come off because I also think I have to replace it. The middle monkey was not kind to it.
And yeah, that's seen better days, or a little.
Tip it up just a little. There you go. Yeah.
Seen some use and some abuse.
Thankfully, JCR, thanks for protecting my steering box.
And yeah, that's a expensive piece of PSC kit that didn't get bashed. We'll have to see whether this fits with the new bumper or not.
Exactly.
I'm going to leave that one visibly and obviously loose so that I don't forget that I need to come back and replace it. Okay. Now, this is all about how big and burly and brawny you are. Some people can pick these up and throw them around by themselves. Usually taking a bumper off a vehicle isn't too much of a precision operation, but there is a lot of weight here with the winch, none of it being particularly conveniently located or distributed. But that is how this works. Okay. Comparative measurements. The front of the frame, and therefore the minimum length of a bumper from that same pinch weld,
It's 8 inches.
is about 8 3/8, it looks like.
So in other words, it was hanging over about 5 inches.
Thereabouts. And a similar kind of 8.5-ish on this side. The bottom of the frame is, we'll call it 28 3/8. So again, about an inch or so higher. And we're at 28. It's almost 28 dead on the passenger side. So that does tell us that this bumper was hanging below the frame, as well as protruding quite a ways in front of it, which is the problem April is hoping to reduce.
Yeah, look at, without a bumper there, look at the difference in approach angle. That's just a few inches from the front of the tire to the front of the bumper.
Now, some people will look at this and say, you know, the right answer is to bob the frame. And
I'm one of them that said that.
that's certainly a possibility. The big challenge with that is you have this front cross member out here, which means that you would need to relocate or replace the cross member coming back. And at the same time, on these TJs, your steering box is located in this space, in this area. So if you start trying to reduce the frame, you lose the opportunity, you lose the factory mounts for the steering box. It would be possible to convert to a different steering box. It would be possible to do a couple of different kinds of things here. There are some folks that do a steering box rotation where they actually bring the steering box to a point where it sits more parallel to the frame. Challenges with that, again, related to this front cross member. And that's where this all kind of comes through. At some point on this Jeep, we may do something more elaborate, but for the moment, we're going to try to keep the front frame structure intact in its factory configuration.
So there's one thing we haven't spoken to yet. I kind of mentioned it in passing. is the front sway bar.
Which would normally attach to these two bolts, and occupy a space right across the top of this. Now, with the configuration of the front axle, front sway bar really doesn't fit, doesn't work well. Again, with the soft suspension, we may revisit putting a front sway bar on this vehicle at some point, but it probably will not locate in this position. There are a couple of aftermarket options that actually leverage the front cross member as the mounting point and actually run the sway bar through the center of this front cross member.
Yep, which is TK1 Racing is one, which is a sway bar I have on the back. And the bumper I had on this before blocked that hole. We would have had to drill it out in order to use that.
With the old bumper broken down, disassembled, let's see what this Motobilt piece looks like.
There should be two items in here, the winch plate and the bumper itself.
That would appear to be a winch plate.
Very different than the other one.
Considerably different design. It's going to place everything a lot lower relative to that. Should still work just fine with our existing Haas fair lead and this arrangement.
Cool.
Just what I wanted. I got to admit, Motobilt does a wonderful job with packaging and packing. The most important part of the package,
Stickers and horsepower.
and the bumper itself.
Considerably smaller.
Now, design here, it brings the recovery eyes much higher. The bumper itself tucks back underneath, gives you kind of that boat side effect. And we can kind of see, based on the location of this lower hole, little lines at this point in the frame, how far forward the bumper is going to want to sit relative to the frame. I believe, just like our other one, because of the location of this cross member, it will be necessary to mount the winch before mounting the bumper. However,
Mock-up. Oh, that hole is just completely open. Not blocked at all.
bumper is obviously designed to work with those sway bars
And with the factory sway bar too.
and will still accommodate the factory sway bar sitting here. However, you note that the back of the winch plate is actually behind this front hole. So the sway bar actually probably sits right tight against that rear lip. So by comparison, at the frame, this bumper is 9 inches forward of that pinch weld,
Versus 13 of the other bumper.
and 8 3/4 on this side, which tells us that the body of this Jeep is probably not sitting entirely straight on the frame.
It's been in a wreck before we got it.
Now, we'll also note from a relatively same point here, 8 1/2 from the front of the body, 9 from the front of the body, and out here in the center, roughly 11 from the front of the body, because it does have this taper out to support the winch.
Well, that's 2 inches shorter, except what is it from the recovery eyes?
Oh, how far?
Yeah,
These?
yeah. Still shorter.
That's 11 1/4.
So it still sticks out shorter. Still not as much as I was kind of hoping, to be honest. But I do like the angle design. That does help with, my approach angle a bit, especially if I take it at angles. So they sent the little package with the card, this little thing that you can fold up into a business card holder. And they also sent rocks, so that when you get this folded up, you can drive your Jeep over some rocks. That's really clever, Motobilt. Thank you.
I'm happy.
All right, now Kenneth's going to show you something that he bought for a different build that we haven't introduced you to yet, and I'm already liking it better than my new bumper. Let's see what we've got.
So this is a builder's part from Motobilt as well. Just a plain flat winch plate, 1/4-inch steel, couple of bends. If you're not wanting a bumper, or the bumper is not where you're wanting to mount your winch, builder's part to help you fab it up. While we've got this sitting here though, we wanted to kind of see what would the alternatives look like if we were to use something like this on the front of the TJ. So setting this up here with the idea of sucking it all the way back.
Oh, that is so clean.
To be tight with the bumper. Now, the upside is it is pretty much right at the appropriate width for a TJ, this builder's part. And the question becomes, if you wanted to run with no bumper, you end up with something that looks like that, with the exposed crossmember, exposed frame out in front of your vehicle. Certainly does not have anything additional adding to your approach angle, but also provides no protection for the frame itself, for your steering box, or anything else in this space. I think if we were going to run this on the TJ, we would need to do some additional fab to actually set this up to provide at least a little bit of protection so that you're not rubbing your frame directly on the rocks every time you do actually make contact with something. So, possibly slide this out, weld in another 1/4-inch plate across the bottom, and really for strength, trying to wrap it around the bottom of the frame as well, out here in front of the steering box. And then you would still want to run something similar to the steering box skid plate in addition.
So, go ahead and put it back where that idea was. What are we looking at for measurements?
So if it was sitting there, from the pinch weld, you're at about 9 inches, which is roughly the same
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
as that Motobilt bumper at the corners.
Yeah.
Yeah, 8 3/4 on this side.
So the big difference would be the center.
The big difference would be here in the center, because this is still that sort of 8.5 kind of value, whereas the Motobilt bumper, because of that sort of triangular shape to it, does stick out a little bit further. The other thing that this does not provide is any of those front recovery points.
Oh, that's true.
And so you would need to come up with your own, figure out a way to tie them into the structure and pull it back together, which is why the bumper for this build, as opposed to just bolting a winch plate on top, is trying to minimize the amount of fab work that we need to do to get this Jeep back on the road, and also having something that looks a little more stylish than just a big square box sitting on the front of the vehicle.
Yeah, I think you can get those recovery points and stuff out of the builder's kit from Motobilt too.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
So our 3 options as they exist today. 1, go back to the old bumper. This is now discontinued by Bestop. We haven't really said anything negative about it. I just don't like how far it sticks out. That's the main reason I'm getting rid of it. This option, the middle option, which is the one I bought for a penny, I really like it. It matches the back. Remember, we have the back half kit. It'll look really good on the front. It doesn't need a lot of fab work. Finish it, bolt it up, we're good to go. And the builder's kit option. This is what's going on Jade. We'll talk about Jade in a bit. Well, in a few videos probably. And it's a builder's kit option. Does require a lot more fab, but it is basically the best option to truly get the bumper sucked back to the frame, and but offers the least protection to the frame without some custom fab work. So I am probably going to stick with the middle one, my original choice. And now that we've seen that it goes on and how it fits and it has better measurements than the Bestop one, the old one, I believe this one is my winner.
So the question of what was this actually for? My thought is to try to use this in conjunction with this 715 build that has been kind of on the back burner and a slow progress thing. What I've just learned is that based on the test fit we did up front, the frame of the 715 is ever so slightly wider than a TJ frame. What I'm looking at doing here is trying to take advantage of this space and modifying this to fit under here and hold the winch just forward on this cross member. And try to tuck this behind the factory 715 front bumper. So it'll be a little bit of a hidden, low profile sort of arrangement.
So it's not for Jade, it's for Kaiser. The goal here is we need to see if my steering box skid, bent as it may be, is compatible with this bumper. Pretty much a guarantee that Motobilt is compatible with Motobilt. So if I'm replacing it, probably am.
Does Motobilt make a steering box skid?
You know, that's a checklist item for when I'm back at the computer. I'm pretty sure they do, but we will find out. But if not, this JCR one has held up really nicely for me.
So at a glance, I would say there's no issues with being able to use the same.
There's a bit of a gap here. Do you see that as an issue at all? Either a lack of support or...
That's just the design of the...
I mean, water and sand's going to get through there, duh. But it'll flow right out. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah,
I'm more worried about lack of structural support. Is it needed?
No.
Is that thick enough steel? It shouldn't be a problem.
No, I think you're fine.
I mean, honestly, this steel is obviously thicker than the steel here on the frame.
And to be completely honest, this skid fits better with this bumper than it did with the other.
With the Bestop?
This front lip that is designed to also be support for the skid. We've never had a bolt in this hole because it's never been in a position where it would line up.
Interesting.
In this case, it actually could be drilled through into the bumper and backed with a bolt on the back side to attach it to the bumper itself. So, to be completely honest, this fits better with this bumper than it did with the other. So no problems using this skid and retaining this skid with the vehicle.
Okay. So, forgiving the steering box skid that is dangling, which is okay, and the whole wires, we just set everything into place. The next decision to make is whether or not I need one of those hoops. We'll be discussing that. Now that we've got the winch set on here, we can see where that would line up. Because the thing after that we need to figure out, lesser of a priority, is I do have bumper mounted lights. And we'll want to go ahead and drill a hole for those before I actually do the finish work on it.
Okay.
All right, time to check and see about the front lights. These are Rigid DSS Pros, and they are designed to go on the bumper. So as Kenneth reassembles the new bumper, because we need everything bolted down to figure out exactly where the lights can be placed, because we're dealing with millimeters here. The cart that he's using was last year's Christmas present. This came from the Websterant store. It's really handy as a shop cart for just wheeling around, doing all sorts of just odd things. It fits under the rig really well when it's up in the air on the lift. You can get all sorts of configurations from 3-shelf, 2-shelf, 4-shelf, flat shelves, lipped shelves, shelves with bottle holders, all sorts of options. But really, really cool bit of kit for in a shop if you're looking for a mobile cart.
So a cheap and handy thing, you see these at the hardware store all the time. You can get them off of Amazon or eBay or wherever. Is just a thread sizer, thread checker. So you pick up a random bolt and say, what size is this? And like for drilling a hole or for matching it or finding a longer version. So I happen to know now that these bolts that came with the install kit for the lights are a 5/16 by 18 thread, which means I need a 5/16 hole, or a hole in this case that'll accept a 5/16 nutser. Okay, so because we have a cross member that sits in this space, kind of between these two holes, kind of centered on this hole, it's going to be very difficult to get behind this to deal with a nut or a bolt or anything else. So we're going to go ahead and use a nutsert in that hole. I swear it was just in there a minute ago, to allow us to mount the bolt, lights from the top after the bumper is fully installed. If you have not gotten one of these riv nut tools and you deal with riv nuts at all, get one. They're well worth it. Just like that, we have a permanent fastener in the bumper for our light. With the nutsert in the bumper, this is just a matter of threading the bolt into the bracket. And then starting it into the nutsert. Spin it down to the point where it starts to tighten up. Eventually you'll want to aim these so you'll want to be able to adjust them later, but for today we'll just generally point them roughly straight ahead and tighten them up.
Hopefully it's now blatantly obvious why we chose to do nutserts with the cross member here, the screw there. You're just not going to get a finger in there. It's just not enough room. So this gives us a chance to do everything from the top without having to jam a finger underneath.
It gives us the ability to mount the light after the bumper is on the vehicle, because we have an interference issue between the light and the bumper bolts. However, once the bumper is installed, these don't usually need to come off unless the whole bumper is coming off the vehicle, in which case we'll have to dismount the individual light.
And you might think, well, why didn't you just move them in? Well, on this side, obviously, we could have. But on this side, we have a whole lot less real estate to adjust the light. So this light is what determined the placement of both lights.